Welcome. Welcome to Hong Kong Blockchain Week's panel discussions. My name is Rico Tang from Cyberport. And today we're going to invite two experts to talk about very interesting topics. Enterprise blockchain for the next decade and its legal implications. Let me introduce the guest to my left. And we have Noëlle Gahan, the Chief Marketing Officer with Digital Transaction Limited. And also we have Kenneth Choy, Consultant and Head of Technology Transactions Practice at law firm Nixon Peabody. And why don't we start with Noëlle? So please give us your thoughts on the current situation of enterprise blockchain and the key challenges. Noëlle.
Thank you so much, Rico, for inviting us, and thank you to Cyberport for this opportunity. And also, I'm humbled and honored to be on the stage here today with Kenneth. So blockchain. Blockchain, in a sense, is the next infrastructure layer for the whole world being connected, the next era of intelligent connectivity. So it's part of the network with IoT and 5G, powered by big data and AI, and experienced through AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality. Not only that, blockchain technology also represents an IT infrastructure evolution from a platform for connecting information to a platform for creating and transmitting value. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So the technology behind IoT has been in existence and working for a number of years already. However, it hasn't been successful in being fully deployed. And the reason for that is twofold. It's about capacity and security. So with 5G coming up, 5G would be able to provide the capacity for IoT to function much better. So what 5G brings actually is fast data rates, low latency, unlimited connectivity for all IoT devices. So you'd think that would be enough, but it's not. Imagine a vehicle or an autonomous car driving around with hundreds of IoT devices connected through 5G, but with no security. Who would feel safe? So what blockchain includes and what blockchain creates is the security level in all IoT transactions. And this, for IoT to really become ubiquitous, you need to have both 5G and blockchain. And only blockchains with ultra-high scalability as well as ultra-high speeds will be able to be part of this infrastructure foundation. From the late 20th century onwards, continuing with the infrastructure, there's not been any significant breakthrough in IT infrastructure. The issue has been largely ignored because companies like Facebook, Tencent, Amazon, Alibaba, all these applications have been really successful in running on top of an infrastructure that was created over 30 years ago. And there's been no change to the current infrastructure. And these applications are really stretching that infrastructure to the limit. So what we have with blockchain now is a new infrastructure which is going to enable the current infrastructure to handle a lot more applications with a lot more power than what we have today. This also explains the lack of progress in solving hurdles for large-scale commercial deployment of blockchain. Although we can go into much discussion on the technical aspects of blockchain, blockchain is, in fact, a software protocol for communicating, just like TCP/IP is the protocol underneath the internet. But most people don't know about TCP/IP, and most people won't actually see the blockchain protocol. But blockchain now has been proven to be able to create consensus and validate transactions. So it's moving today from what we call experimental mode into mainstream mode. And we're just seeing that happen today. And more and more applications are going to migrate onto blockchain. And talking about that, the last thing I want to mention to this question, sorry I'm taking a long time, is digital transformation. So most companies today are embracing digital transformation, but without a high-performing blockchain, CEOs will not be able to get the results that they're expecting. So PwC came out with a report recently, very recently actually, called Time for Trust, where they interviewed CEOs of major companies, and 61% of the CEOs interviewed stated that digital transformation was one of their 3 top priorities. What they're forgetting to mention is that unless it includes blockchain, the results they're expecting will never happen.
Thank you. And Kenneth, how does the law react to the changes? And we all know that, right, the blockchain technologies, right, is getting more attractions and also being applied, right, in different industries. So how is blockchain regulated today?
Well, first of all, thank you, Rico, for inviting me, and Noëlle. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. Maybe a little bit of a background on how law works certainly in many Western and international jurisdictions would be helpful. First of all, the law never leads in terms of technology. It always follows. And if it comes to something that the law doesn't really know, it's not going to do something. It's not going to set new laws. It's going to wait and see how the technology matures and settles before it decides what to do. And usually what it does is once it's settled, it looks to existing law to see if the concept of existing law can be used to apply to the new technology and the new applications. If it can, great. If not, then usually they turn to the legislative branch of government to pass new laws in order to regulate the new technology and its applications. And as far as blockchain is concerned, though, blockchain technology itself is not really regulated at all by any government entities. Instead, what is really being regulated are the applications that are used on that use blockchain technology. And the one thing that comes to mind, of course, is Bitcoin, which is really the first widely, or the most popular and the first widely known application of blockchain or distributed ledger technology, if you will. In fact, most people think of blockchain as Bitcoin, but they're not the same, because Bitcoin is just one application of the technology. Well, many regulators are very concerned about Bitcoin, for example, and particularly these are the financial regulators. They're very concerned about that, and so they want to set rules and regulations that will apply to Bitcoin. And actually, if you look at it, my earlier comments, is that what they're doing really is they're using existing laws to see if that applies to Bitcoin. Well, in some ways, yes, in some way, no. And but the concern is there, and the application is there. But on the other hand, just using overall blockchain technology, there really isn't any specific regulation. I mean, for instance, there may be some, let's say in the logistics industry, there may be rules and regulations, but those are not. Those are already set, and those are not specifically intended to regulate blockchain. So the short answer, basically, is that, well, yes, there's some regulations in some areas and no regulations in other area, at least not yet.
That brings me right to my next question, Noëlle. What are your insights on why blockchain has yet to fulfill its commercial promises with the very limited wide-scale adoptions we all know about it. So even though that the technology has been mature for some time.
Well, let me disagree with the word mature here. So blockchain, just as Kenneth said, with Bitcoin has been here for a while, but blockchain for the enterprise space has not, is much more recent. And basically what has happened is, in reality, most blockchain platforms which are deployed today were designed from Bitcoin and force-fitted like a square pin in a round hole into the enterprise space. And that has led to inadequate solutions that don't match enterprise requirements. Enterprises should be looking for a blockchain that was designed for their needs specifically from the bottom up, and emulating the enterprise decision-making process for consensus and trust. So enterprises have been doing business for hundreds and thousands of years, and they have a consensus protocol. So if we first look at consensus, business owners make decisions without seeking consensus from other business owners. Also, if you're a business executive, you might seek consensus from some of your peers, right? So what you want to do is design a blockchain that actually has this consensus in mind, and that would actually streamline the consensus protocol within a blockchain. But what that also does is it refutes proof of work or proof of stake as making them inadequate for enterprise consensus. The other point is trust. Trust can only be earned and must be continuously validated and proven. And the only way to achieve that is with provable immutability, where you can prove the immutability of your blocks without having to reveal the data inside. If you can do that, and also with the requirement that some auditors can have access to that information under law if it's required. If you can do that, then you can create trust. Right? And only then can a blockchain with an immutable and trusted transparent platform will allow for easy transactions within an enterprise. So once you have this, then it becomes a lot more simple. There are other key features which are available or not available in blockchains today, and we can look at that list of features. So I can name a few features, such as scalability, and you will recognize that such and such blockchain can do it. For example, I can say that Ethereum is very scalable, albeit the more it scales, the slower it gets. It works today at 12 transactions per second. Other blockchains don't scale as well, but yes, some existing blockchains have solved the scalability issues, while others have had to compromise, instead to focus on security or decentralization. We call this, in blockchain jargon, the blockchain trilemma, and it's the compromise that all blockchain companies today have had to face, but choosing between decentralization, scalability, or security. Right. So going forward, back to your question, Rico, as to why blockchains has yet to fulfill its enterprise promise. The main reason are sevenfold. The first one is the scalability challenge. Right? If you're not scalable enough or it affects performance are two of the reasons behind scalability. Speed, i.e. too slow. Latency, i.e. too long. Right? Lack of GDPR, privacy compliance. And lack of interoperability. One of the big issues today is that a lot of applications are already being deployed out on blockchains, on first-generation enterprise blockchains, some of them even on second generation. But moving on to the third generation of blockchains, they all lack interoperability. It's very difficult to move from one to the other. And the two more features is questionable immutability that's missing, and also security. So those are the 7 features that enterprise customers want, and they want them all at the same time. So even though some blockchains have 1, have 2, or have 3, the issue is that blockchain will not be used in an enterprise in a single area. It needs to be used to improve business processes across the entire business operations of an enterprise. And I'll give you an example. Recently, a digital transaction, we've been talking to a fashion apparel manufacturer who is exploring to use blockchain as part of their supply chain. They have a global supply chain in many different countries, and they sell all over the world, including the US. And I mentioned that for a specific reason. Right now, they do everything on paper. They receive the order on paper, it trickles back to the beginning of their supply chain, and they order raw materials on paper. And this goes back and forth, and it's very slow, it's very inefficient, and it's prone to errors. So now they're looking of putting everything on the supply chain onto a blockchain. Now this is the ideal situation for blockchain. Blockchain fits perfectly well in an environment where you have many small transactions. Not only will this improve the efficiency of the process, but it'll be very important. It adds one item and it adds security and transparency. Now, the reason this is also more important as well than efficiency is that, for example, right now, the US Customs Department is limiting import of products with cotton that comes from certain locations. So this company has to be able to prove to the US Customs that the cotton with which they have manufactured their products is coming from certain locations and not coming from others. With the blockchain, the provenance of the entire materials from the beginning to the end for every one of their clothing can actually be traced because all that information is already available on the blockchain. And with immutability and provable immutability, which is legally acceptable, then they can actually prove to US Customs with a click on their phone or their iPad of where the cotton came from. But why stop there is the question. So if they're going to be using blockchain for their supply chain, Why wouldn't they use blockchain in all parts of their organization? For example, human resources, billing, accounting, salaries, infrastructure management, inventory management, asset tracking using IoT, repairs and warranty management, and the list goes on. All these business processes can be improved with blockchain. But the question is, if the blockchains they're using only have specific features here which are good for the supply chain, and then they have specific features here which is good for HR, for example, it's not going to work because these blockchains are not interoperable. So you need to have a blockchain that has all the features that are needed so that they can actually deploy the same blockchain in their entire business operations.
So let's back to the applications of blockchain and also to the law. And one term that is commonly used is a smart contract. And some say the smart contracts will make lawyers obsolete. And is the legal profession concerned about this possibility? Kenneth?
Well, I guess it may lead to early retirement for me, but realistically, no. I think to the contrary, that those lawyers that really understand what a smart contract really is, really sees it more as a tool that will help them with their practice and not really something that will displace them. Let me explain, how a smart contract works. And I'll use a very actually old tech example. For instance, there are vending machines out in the hallway. And when you go to the vending machine, you can put in your coins, but nowadays I guess you use your octopus card. So you go to the vending machine, you look around, you choose your product, you press the product, it tells you how much to pay. You put your octopus card there, and the amount is deducted. The product comes out, you take it, and the transaction is done. Well, in a way, a smart contract works like that vending machine. What it does is that it's a protocol. It's instructions, just as instructions to the vending machine. So let's say the vending machine is a smart contract, which in a way it really is. The instructions to the machine really is, well, you see if the products are there. If the products are there and available, it will show up as being available. You set the price for it, for the product. And if someone pays that price for it, then the machine turns and the product comes out and drops into the slot where the consumer can pick it up. And then the machine itself, then it will reprogram itself on the existing itinerary. So in a way, that's how a smart contract works. It's just a set of instructions, like instructions to the vending machine as to how it works. Well, in terms of the smart contract, there may be some problems that smart contracts cannot necessarily handle that may require human intervention or lawyers. What if, in terms of what if you put your octopus card there? The vending machine turns, but the product gets stuck, and you don't get your product. Well, the smart contract, the vending machine doesn't know how to deal with that. What if someone pulls the electricity right in the middle of the contract, or the pulling the product? Well, the machine doesn't know how to respond to that. Okay, and so in that sense, I think that smart contracts are very useful, but it can never replace the human intervention. Lawyers will be needed in order to make sure that everything works out if there is a problem. And besides, someone has to give the instructions to the vending machine, to the smart contract, as to what is required. Well, yes, that's technology and somebody can code that in. But what is really needed behind that is to someone who can actually give the proper instructions to the machine. And so that's how a smart contract works, and that's why I really don't think that it will replace lawyers. It will just help lawyers do the job easier, so that you don't need to have a lawyer every time you want to buy a can of soda from a machine.
That's a good news, right, for the lawyer.
Yeah, I think he's just trying to save his job.
So, apart from the smart contract, right, another big topic, right, we discuss very often is data privacy. So, Noëlle, we would like to have your thoughts on the GDPR, right? We heard so much about it. So, how should we handle, right, the data in this new world?
Absolutely. And I'm sure that everyone is aware that the immutability of blockchain puts it in direct opposition to the General Data Protection Regulation, or EU's GDPR privacy ordinance. We need to look at the mixed blessing of the indelible ledger in light of GDPR's right to be forgotten laws. But not just that, there's more to it. There's also cybersecurity theft and also the age-old fat finger. Right? If enterprises are to embrace blockchain, it cannot be that human errors are immutable. This is just not going to work. Right? And yes, nowadays, every business are expecting privacy GDPR compliance, and it doesn't have to be the EU GDPR privacy ordinance. It can be any privacy compliance rules that is governed by those countries, right? And that is going to be an expectation that if you're going to put in a digital tool to improve your business operations, that tool will have to be compliant to any privacy ordinance that is legislating at that time. So there must be a way for the blockchain to have the ability to forget. Otherwise, it cannot improve efficiencies in enterprises. Without that feature, any application needing GDPR compliance or any privacy compliance will be out of reach of blockchain. Enterprises today should not consider deploying a blockchain that does not have this critical feature. Okay. Two other elements of privacy are provable immutability and trust. There needs to be a mechanism for sharing meaningful data without data leakages. And while complying to the privacy ordinance, such as EU GDPR, this sounds like a mouthful, but unless all of these can be handled together, the blockchain technology will struggle to become the foundation of the smart society. There's one more thing, which is not exactly GDPR, but it also means controlling your data. And it's very important for the owner of the data to remain in control, especially for organizations and even governments. Imagine if governments can't control the data that they want to collect. I think it's the lack of ability for organizations to remain in control of their data once it's uploaded onto a public blockchain that makes organizations very wary of using them. At the same time, fully private blockchains, in where organizations retain full control of their data, will always be criticized for not being decentralized enough, and even for not being blockchains at all. So for any business and government organization, this is a must, with the provision that certain third parties, such as police auditors, can access under certain conditions. The only way to balance these needs, we believe, is to use a hybrid blockchain infrastructure, where both the advantages of private and public blockchains are fully taken advantage of.
So, Kenneth, let's briefly talk about the privacy compliance requirements in the legal domain. Could a blockchain be used without being compliant to the privacy compliance ordinance such as GDPR?
Well, from a legal perspective or from a compliance perspective, there are really two aspects. That is the privacy of personal data. And personal data is essentially data about a living person, not a company or anything else, a living person that can be used to identify that person, or that information coupled with other information can lead to that person's identity. And the second aspect, as Noëlle said, is the security of the data. And so from the law's perspective, the concerns about data privacy relates to how the personal data is collected, and whether that the data subject, that is the person whose data is being collected and used, has given, I guess, informed consent or knowing consent about how that personal data will be collected and used. And then after collection of that data, how that who's going to be using it, how it's going to be used. So these are some of the things that are concerning. And for Europe, for example, there's also the issue of profiling, whether profiling is going to be used. Profiling is getting various data about that specific individual through various means, using big data, AI, and so forth. And also whether such profile, if it is done, it's done automatically. That means a machine does everything and categorize you, or whether human intervention is also involved. And so these are, and also whether such use of profiling or such use of that data is within the scope of that informed consent, that permission that the person had given. And I think the key aspect that people are very concerned about really is this, that sometimes data is collected, especially on a blockchain, that it may be used by other nodes, other people, and sometimes it may be exported off-chain. And so persons whose data is involved are very concerned. And I think the law generally is also concerned about that, to make sure that person understand what is involved, who's taking the information, how that information is taken, how it's going to be used, how that information is going to be protected, and how secure that infrastructure is in terms of that person's private personal data.
Absolutely.
Kenneth, what role can lawyers play, right, in these regulatory matters today?
I think lawyers, and maybe this has also helped us to keep our jobs, I think it is important for lawyers to get involved in the whole process as early as possible. And the main reason is because for instance, privacy laws, actually they're fairly complex, and different jurisdictions have different requirements. And since everything's on a blockchain, it's not just within one jurisdiction. It's essentially global. And so that means that the way the infrastructure is set up, the blockchain is set up, has to be conforming with all these different regulatory regimes. And so that's why I think that you need to have a lawyer to be involved early in the process to make sure that it is done right. Because it's much easier to set it up right than try to fix it after everything is broken or after a problem develops.
Actually, I'll just jump in very quickly here as well. And there's the whole concept of GDPR compliance, but that also goes hand in hand with provable immutability. There's a concept that blockchain and immutability go in hand. However, this concept is in reality questionable. And most blockchains have in fact questionable immutability, as fork chains can be deleted, and collusion among a majority of endorsed nodes can also conspire to remove blocks or rewind the chain. So as a result, you have to have the ability, in order to fulfill the laws, to be able to prove immutability. But at the same time, the data owner doesn't want that information to be shared. So being able to prove immutability, and that includes the ability to be forgotten. If there is some changes on the blockchain, you have to be able to prove that without actually divulging the information, because the person has requested the ability to be forgotten.
Kenneth, keeping on the privacy theme, and what about smart cities? And how do you envision, right, the protection of citizens' data in the view of the smart cities of privacy versus, right, the acquisitions of smart city of surveillance instead? How will the law change the depth to, or the blockchain can help?
Well, I think technological innovation is going to continue unabated, and that's its reality. And the law has to work very hard to try to keep pace. And it really involves a balancing act until the technology is mature enough. From a smart cities perspective, okay, it's very important that the data subjects, that is you, me, and all individuals involved, participate in this process. And perhaps one of the considerations is really, instead of putting everything on the blockchain itself, maybe there's a way of doing it that what goes on the blockchain is really just a hash rather than the actual information. So that may be one way of where a data subject can have some control over how his or her information is used in the overall smart city regime. And maybe another way of doing it to help smart city control maybe population flow, traffic, and whatnot. It's not really using the specific individual's information, but basically using big data to anonymize the information, which will be able to help you to make projections and set policies and so forth. But yet, on the other hand, of this balance, the individual has to play an important role. That is, the person has to contribute and has to participate in this for it to work. Because if it doesn't, then the whole concept will be just a city would or a government or community would try to impose certain regulations to have mandatory compliance. And that may not really work out that well. So it really takes cooperation. It's balance. You have to balance individual rights with the needs of setting policies. And so I think that blockchain has a role, but it has to be refined from where it is now.
Noëlle, in summary, what are the key features the business advisor need to look for in a modern blockchain solutions?
Indeed. What is critical here today is that enterprises need to have access to a single blockchain platform that encapsulates all the technological enhancements at the same time, with no compromise, so that they can use one single blockchain, as I mentioned earlier, for all their business process enhancements. And those features that every enterprise should be looking for today in a single platform are unlimited scalability with no degradation on performance, high speeds of up to 100,000 transactions per second, and I'll go into that while that's very important. Real-time latency. A lot of applications are not considering blockchain today because the latency is too short to finalize transactions. Full GDPR privacy compliance. I already spoke about that just now. Provable immutability. Again, I've mentioned that why is so important nowadays. And also, this subject has been really overlooked. We believe that in the blockchain space. The number 7 is emulation of existing blockchain platforms. So if you have a blockchain that's running at 100 transactions per second, you can actually emulate the other blockchains platforms like Hyperledger or Ethereum and have applications that were developed on those first-generation enterprise blockchains and move them to a higher performance third-generation enterprise blockchain. And so what that enables is that companies who have already invested a lot of money into these applications and have already designed their new business process operations to upload and take advantage of a newer blockchain, because that environment can actually emulate the current environment that they're working under. And last but not least, something that I call hybrid squared blockchain. So blockchains typically work in either private or public or permission or permissionless. And each of these different domains actually have certain benefits and also certain inconveniences. But if you have a blockchain that can work in all 4 of these spaces, then you're providing the enterprise with the most flexibility to address not just one part of their business operation, like the supply chain, but all of their business operations, as I mentioned, as I gave the example earlier of the supply chain manufacturer.
Kenneth, and what do you see as the most critical blockchain features and why?
Actually, that's a tough question, but let me address it this way. That we should think about blockchain as a tool, and as a tool that depends on how it is used and who's using it. And so I think that the most important feature of a blockchain is that we have to realize that the tool itself can and should never overtake the user.
Noëlle, many organizations are already exploring ways to incorporate blockchain rights in their current technology infrastructures plan. And what can you tell those organizations on how and where they should start?
So in summary, previously, organizations were looking for ways to drive their digital transformation. Nowadays, organizations should be looking at ways to drive their digital transformation with blockchain. Every organization keeps its own records while having no master ledger of all their activities. Instead, records are distributed across internal units and functions. The problem is almost true for every organization. The easiest and quickest way to use blockchain is to migrate any existing process your organization may have that has to do with record transaction, keeping and implementing a blockchain solution for that. In order to take full advantage of digital transformation to take place, organization must take that first step. And I'll add one more thing, is that most blockchains, even the first generation blockchains today, can handle a simple digitization for the digital transformation process. But enterprises need to be looking much forward than that. And they do want to have a blockchain that includes all the features that I listed earlier about enterprise blockchains, so that they can actually look at implementing blockchain much wider in their business operations than just the initial steps of a digital transformation. And so companies should really be looking at third and fourth generation blockchains today. Thank you.
So, Kenneth, let's get to the closing remarks. In your opinions, where do you see the initial impacts of the blockchain, and where do you see the main applications in the next 5 years' time?
Well, in terms of technology, 5 years is a very, very long time, and it's really hard to predict what will happen. For instance, 5 years ago, nobody's talking about enterprise blockchain. So there's a lot of change. But one thing I think that will happen if the current trend continues is that more and more people will understand blockchain more, and they'll be educated more about it. And I think that is probably the key thing, key feature about blockchain that will still be around 5 years from now.
So once again, thank you, Noëlle, and also Kenneth, for joining the panel. So thank you for your time. We hope you enjoyed the insight shared by our experts.
Thank you.
Thank you.